Hi, this is Helen from Talking to Teenagers. Today we're talking about resilience and anxiety in relation to resilience as part of the resilience project, particularly for parents, but not just for parents. So I thought that we would cover today about anxiety and what happens in the brain and a little bit in the body when we experience anxiety. It will become apparent towards the end of the video why we're talking about anxiety in relation to resilience. So this diagram here just explains a little bit about anxiety and what happens in the brain. Okay, so this is how I describe it to young people, teenagers particularly, and it's just a really simple way of understanding it. So three main areas of the brain really, and when we experience anxiety, this part of the brain here is called the amygdala. It's a very emotional part of the brain and it's thousands and thousands of years old. So when we experience anything anxiety provoking, whether it be something external that you see or whether it be something internal that you think about, this part of the brain here, this sort of sets off alarm signals. This is the fight or flight response, which most people have heard of. So what happens is that it recognises that you're anxious about something. It starts to gently send out signals that say you may be in danger, and so if you can get that in time and you can deal with that in time, that's that, and you sort of settle down and it's okay. But if we don't do that and you become highly anxious, this part of the brain here is the prefrontal cortex, and it is, we'll call it the boss, okay? So the amygdala is the security guard, which watches out for everything that's dangerous. And the boss is responsible for logic, reason, problem solving. It is the part of the brain that develops later in adolescence, so it starts to develop quite rapidly from sort of 17, 18 onwards, and it's finished developing at about 23, 24. So it's the reasoned, rational part of the brain. So what happens is that if you have a scenario, let's say that you are anxious about going in the canteen at work, for instance, your amygdala, your security guard, will sort of send out little signals that say you're quite anxious. And what it does is, essentially, is it tries to catch this part of the brain here, this really logical, reasoned part of the brain, before it's too anxious, and the boss is able to fact check and see whether actually you are in any danger. So, you know, such and such has entered the canteen at work, feels quite anxious. Has there been a scenario before where there has been any danger in the canteen at work, for instance? I know that's a really sort of small example to use, but it's just easy to do it for now. What happens is when we become totally panicked is that the boss goes out for lunch, okay? So the security guard isn't able to check with the prefrontal cortex to see whether there is any danger at all. So the logic side of the brain is gone, forget it. If you've ever had an argument in the street, or you've had something where you've felt quite frightened or panicked, sometimes it's very difficult to recall the details of that, and that's to do with part of the logic part of the brain has sort of gone offline, if you will. So what the amygdala tries to do is a second best thing to try and keep you safe, is that it goes round to something called the hippocampus, which is in charge of long-term and short-term memory. And we'll call her the secretary, because she has lots of memories filed and banked and stored here. So the amygdala goes round to the secretary and says, you know, Helen is particularly panicked about being in the canteen. This all happens very rapidly, obviously. Is there anything in the memory banks that says actually she was in danger the last time she was in the canteen at work? And the secretary is working under pressure, so trying to find an answer very, very quickly. And so sifts through all those memories and tries to find a match. And it may be, yes, she was panicked when she was in the supermarket, another scenario where there's lots of people around or whatever. So what happens is that the secretary tries to match a memory in the hope of keeping you safe, but it matches sort of this bit of it, but it's mismatched on this bit of it, if you will. So there's something that's similar, but it's not the same scenario. And so the amygdala sort of says, thank you very much, and sends out loads and loads and loads of panic signals into the body and into the brain, and floods your system for the fight or flight response. And that's really how anxiety works. So the trick is that before the amygdala gets very, very, very sort of heated and very emotional and very panicky, is that you have some strategies to be able to calm down. And that's where the logic side of the brain comes in. So that's where the boss comes in. So you're hoping to keep the boss online for as long as possible. And later on in the series, we're going to think about how we can do that. But the reason why... can I just say, well, I remember, for anybody who has suffered developmental trauma or post-traumatic stress disorder, this fight or flight response goes off all the time, sometimes like a faulty fire alarm without reason. And although that can be treated, obviously, some of the things that I'm going to speak about might not apply. So that's just to bear in mind. So the reason why we're talking about anxiety and resilience is because, although it's really helpful to know that stuff, you need to know that stuff because rumination is part of what keeps us from being resilient. So ruminating over things, why things didn't work, why has it ended up this way, I'm no good at this, this is never going to work, I can't believe this has happened to me, I can't believe that I said such and such, he said this, you know, that sort of rumination. And what happens when we ruminate is we do it in a very highly anxious state. So there isn't actually any learning to be had from rumination. It's a little bit pointless and a bit useless, although it's very difficult not to do. So, rumination basically doesn't allow any new learning because while we ruminate, we are in a highly anxious state. And we have just spoken about the fact that when you're in a highly anxious state, the boss is out to lunch and you're not able to take on any new learning. So logic, reasoning, problem solving doesn't happen when boss is out to lunch. So that's the main reason why we've covered this, is to do with rumination. It's pretty pointless. And it's okay me sort of saying that, and you think, well, how do I stop from doing that? And we will address that later on in the series. There is a couple of things I should mention. So worry, if you feel that you can't be resilient because of persistent and continual worry, there is a problem maybe in the fact that worry facilitates, there's a lot of evidence to say that worry facilitates us from thinking about something that's happened that's particularly distressing, so an incident or an event that's got lots of imagery attached to it, that if you worry about the very small things and sometimes bigger things, it facilitates us from being able to think about the stuff that's really quite distressing. So that's something that you might want to bear in mind, that there's something that if you incessantly worry, and worry is a massive part of your life, then there's lots of research evidence to say that it facilitates us from not thinking about very distressing things. And that very distressing thing sometimes has quite a lot of imagery with it. So that was something that I wanted to point out. So we can't learn in a really highly anxious state. So rumination is one of the things that keeps us from being resilient. That's the number one message today. And we will go on to think about what we can do about rumination. But at the moment, it's just enough to notice whether it's a big part of your life or not. So just also to finish off, if you are quite a consistent worrier and a persistent worrier, Sometimes it might be in CBT, they do something called the worry hour. So when you start to worry and worry about things, you say to yourself, I'm not worrying about that. I'm putting aside a worry hour between 6 and 7, 5 and 6 tonight, where I'm going to worry, and I'm going to bore the pants off worrying, okay? So, and when it gets to 5 or 6, or between 6 and 7 or whatever, you may do 10 or 15 minutes of worrying, but you'll become quite sick of it quite quickly. So that's a way for you to, instead of just worry, and it carries on all the way throughout the day, you can think, stop, I've got time to worry about that tonight. I'm going to write down all the things that I'm going to worry about, and I'm going to worry about them between 6 and 7 tonight. So that's just a little strategy just to keep you going this week, as far as incessant worry is concerned. But alongside worry is also, worry is a part of rumination. So just to, I've covered quite a lot of things there, but that's the learning for this week. So, yeah, if you've got any questions, or if you'd like to comment, or if you'd like to share the video, if you know somebody who does incessantly worry or does ruminate quite a lot, if they could benefit from it, you could share the video, and I would be really grateful if you did. So that's it from Sunny Morecambe today. Thank you.